Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing some card analysis, but instead of looking at current cards, I want to go back and take a look at the cards of yesteryear, see what Bushiroad's B team was cooking up in the past, and how it failed spectacularly. So join me as we take a look at Vanguard's Barely Supported. Today we'll be looking at another Fighters Collection archetype. This time we'll be choosing an archetype that was created with Fighters Collection 2015 Winter for the Murakumo clan. This set in particular was focused a lot on the archetypes given to the 23 clans during the Break Ride era. Going into G, the Murakumo clan was fairly underdeveloped in terms of archetypes. Unlike other clans in the Break Ride era, Murakumo didn't receive a dedicated archetype. That left Bushiroad to make an archetype out of one of the previous boss units from the past. There are actually quite a few to choose from. Shiryuki and Mandala were representatives from the Limit Break, and Break Ride actually introduced a new ride line for Murakumo with Magatsu. Other clans received strides that supported their original Break Ride unit, and Murakumo certainly had one of its own. So which did Bushiroad decide to go with? None of them. Instead, they decided to go and support Murakumo's reverse unit from Break Ride. Yeah, I don't get it either. So, let's get into it with Hyakki. This archetype would debut in BT14 Brilliant Strike with a single card, Covert Demonic Dragon Hyakki Vogue Reverse. This was a grade 3 with 11k power in the following ability. On Limit Break 4, you can lock 2 of your rear guards to give up to 3 of your Hyakki Vogue reverses 10k. Normally giving 3 specific units power would be pretty bad, but of course this is Murakumo, the clan known for duplicating rear guards. Essentially, what this skill is a blanket 10k to the front row, assuming you get 3 copies of Hyakki Vogue on board. Thankfully, that's not too difficult thanks to this unit's second skill. When it's placed on Vanguard, you can CB2 in order to call a copy from the deck, with it returning to the hand during the end phase. For a card made in the Break Ride era, this card is surprisingly good. The second skill combos with the first skill, which is something we typically didn't see around this time. The CB2 is a little harsh, but it's typical for the time, and the first skill is essentially costless. When you consider combos with cards like Kagoda Bloom and Metamorphox, it's not surprising that this deck had a bit of relevancy at the time. I suppose this was probably the reason Hyakki got selected to get a stride. As a final note, this card technically does have Lord, but that's irrelevant these days. And so with Fighters Collection, Hyakki became an archetype with the introduction of Ambush Demon Stealth Dragon Hyakki Vogue Nayuta, a grade 4 G unit with 15k plus power. It has a once per turn skill where, if you have a Hyakki Heart, you can put a Hyakki rearguard to the bottom of the deck in order to copy any of your other rearguards, with the Calls unit getting an extra 10k. This card isn't terrible for a first stride, considering Hyakki's skill can call it a Hyakki that can be used to pay the cost. The fact that you can tutor for any rearguard is actually fairly nice, but the fact that only that rearguard gains power is mildly annoying. It's early G power levels, and in this day and age, it probably doesn't make the cut. However, we can consider that there are some newer cards that can change their name, meaning that it's much easier to use this skill nowadays. In GBT10, we would see the Hyakki archetype revisited with 5 new cards. As is tradition, these cards would be a single card from each grade. Let's see how Bushiroad decided to update the archetype. We start off with Stealth Dragon Hitodama Handler, a grade 0 with 5k power and 10k shield. It has the Forerunner ability, and when your Vanguard attacks, you can put this and Hyakki Vogue Reverse Rearguard into the soul to call another Hyakki Vogue Reverse from your deck, with it getting an extra 5k power and returning to the bottom of the deck at the end of the turn. So this card is actually not half bad. It enables multi-attack, and although it is restricted to a specific unit, that unit is not difficult to get on board, and once again, with the introduction to cards that copy names, it's much easier to achieve these days. It is a bit of a shame that the designers didn't think to future-proof this card and make it work with any Hyakkis, but it's still manageable. However, we are kind of past the days of Forerunners being relevant, so you'd probably be calling this card from the hand or deck with a skill. I think it's up to the player when the best time to utilize this skill would be. Next up, we have Stealth Dragon Shenju Raid, a grade 1 with 7k power and 5k shield. During your end phase, if you have a Hyakki Vanguard, you can rest this unit to draw a card and retire it. So this skill is really confusing at first glance. In order to use this skill, you would have to not use this unit to attack or boost, and why would you want to do that? Well, in case you've forgotten, Hyakki still is a reverse unit at this point. So the logic behind this skill is that you lock this card for Hyakki Limit Break, and then during the end phase, when it unlocks, it'll be standing and you can use this skill. This combos with the second skill, which allows you to Soul Blast 1 and rest in order to add 5k power to any grade 3 or greater unit. This skill allows you to power up your Hyakki rearguards before this card gets locked. However, committing a soul for 5k power really isn't that great anymore. It's still usable even with the V-Series Hyakki Reverse, since that unit locks your own rear guards as well. Whether these skills are worth playing a 5k shield grade 1 really is up to you. Our next card is Stealth Dragon, Catan Slayer, a grade 2 with 9k power and 5k shield. It has 2 skills, with the first being that it gains 2k power when attacking a Vanguard if you're on a Hyakki Vanguard. This skill is fine if outdated. It's unfortunate that it only gains power on the Vanguard, which means it can't hit Force or D grade 2 rear guards unboosted. With the advent of the V-Series, Catan Slayer won't be able to hit most Vanguards on his own anymore. His second skill is much more useful. When your Hyakki unit is placed in the same row as this unit, you can slide him into the soul and bottom deck any card from your drop zone in order to counter charge 1. This skill is actually very nice, as it provides both soul and counter blasts, while also recycling triggers or extra copies to be duplicated. Add to that the skill activates when any Hyakki is placed and in the same row and not column, and you have a super versatile card. You can have it up in the front row and use its skill when you ride a Hyakki or stride. The Hyakki archetype itself doesn't use a ton of CB outside of the original Hyakki Reverse, so the extra CB can commit it to using other skills. Finishing up with the main deck support, we have Covert Demonic Dragon, Hyakki Zora, a grade 3 with 11k power. While on deck or rear, it's also regarded as Hyakki Rogue Reverse, and when it's placed on Van, you can Soul Blast 2 to ride a Hyakki Reverse from deck. If you ride with this skill, you countercharge 1. So this skill is not terrible. With the introduction of V Hyakki Reverse, this card becomes a ride fixer that lets you get an Axel at the same time. It might be worth noting that you can technically chain this skill to itself, as being a Hyakki Vogue Reverse means that you can re-ride and use the skill again. But apart from deck thinning, all you accomplish is emptying out the soul to countercharge. There are probably some situations where this is viable, but in general, you'll probably only use this skill once. The main reason to play this card is that it's another grade 3 Hyakki. This helps you use Hinotama and makes it harder for you to run out of copies to call. And our last G support card comes in the form of Ambush Demon Stealth Dragon Hyakki Zora Asogi, a grade 4 G unit with 15k plus power. It has the once per turn act ability 2 on GB2 for Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1, and discard a card from hand to search your deck for up to 5 Hyakki units and call them to rear. Those units also get the skill that, on GB3, they can attack from the back row and are returned to the bottom of the deck during the end phase. Okay, so this is supposed to be the Hyakki finisher. It single-handedly setups for 6 attacks, assuming you have enough Hyakkis left in the deck, or more, with Axel circles. Of course, these units won't be getting any power, but thankfully there's a card we'll see later that can fix that. Of course, the biggest issue with this is that both of these skills are locked behind Generation Break. Unless you G-Guard, you won't be able to use this unit's first skill, and you probably won't be able to unlock 6 attacks until second stride. In the current premium format, most games are over by turn 5, so the amount of time it takes for this card to be usable is just way too slow. During the G era, Hyakki wouldn't see enough support to make it a viable deck. The power level of G was always too high for it to ever have a fighting chance. That being said, the G support alone would be enough to make Hyakki an overall complete deck. It has a solid vision and decent support cards that played into the original strategy of the deck, as well as giving it new ones. This is where Hyakki would stay until the V-Series would introduce a never-before-seen Hyakki in 2019 with VBT6, Phantasmal Steed Restoration. After 5 years of only having the reverse Hyakki, we would finally see what Hyakki was like before being reversed with Covert Demonic Dragon Hyakki Vogue, a grade 3 with 12k power and the imaginary gift Axel. It has a single axe skill, where, on Van or Rear, you can counterblast 1 and discard a card to call Covert Demonic Dragon Hyakki Vogue from the deck. Then, if you have 5 more units, all your rearguards with the same name as this unit gain plus 10k power. So I believe this card saw a fair amount of play at the time it was released, and it makes sense. This is an overall solid card. The V-Series introduced plentiful ways of changing units names, so it was even feasible to get the 10k on more than just those 2 units. The skill being an act, and also active on rear, means that you could theoretically chain multiple Hyakki Vogues in order to build a board and stack power. Not only that, but you could use it next turn if it survives your opponent's turn. In the context of a devoted Hyakki deck, it has mild synergy with the previous support. It serves as another Hyakki card that can be used with Nyota, although its skill being an act doesn't make it a good clone target. Catan Slayer appreciates the additional Hyakki name, but Hitodama and Zora are cards that only work with the reverse Hyakki. Where this card shines is when it's used with Zora Asogi. This card can be called off of its skill and then used to call yet another Hyakki to an Axel circle. As we'll see with the next card, this can result in 6 units with the same name, with Hyakki Vogue giving them an extra 10k, and Asogi allowing them to attack from the back row, we're looking at 7 attacks with an extra 10k to the entire board. Our last card comes from V Clan Collection Volume 3. It's the V Covert Demonic Dragon Hyakki Vogue Reverse. This time, it's a grade 3 with 12k power and the Imaginary Gift Axel. While it's in the deck, rear, or van, it's treated as the base Hyakki Vogue. This skill is nice since it gives you another target to call from Hyakki Vogue. It also makes all the name changing that much easier. The second skill lets you, on van, Soul Blast 1 to search your deck for up to 3 cards with the same card name as this card. Then, you must lock cards equal to the number of cards you called. Between Hyakki Vogue, Hyakki Zora, and other copies in reverse, you shouldn't ever find yourself short on targets, but the main dilemma is deciding how you want to call. Even though this is a free call 3 for 1 soul, it comes at the cost of losing 3 rearguard circles for the turn. You really have to decide how you want to attack and what circles to give up. There's also the fact that this skill is an act on van, so realistically you're only going to use it on your first grade 3 turn going first. Hyakki Vogue Reverse has one more skill, which is that when your card is unlocked during the end phase, you can bottom deck one of your rearguards to bounce one of your rearguards to the hand. This skill is fairly versatile as you could theoretically clone something like a PG, then bounce both copies to your hand. You could also just add a reride that you call from the second skill. The bottom decking of a rearguard really isn't that bad of a cost since you can just put back the rearguards you called. However, just like with the previous skill, you probably won't be using this skill past turn 3. Outside of Hyakki Reverses, Murakumo has no way to lock rearguards. You can actually use this card as a bit of a counter to Link Joker since you'll destride, then unlock, giving you the chance to use this unit's skill to clear up your board. Outside of that, you play this just because it's overall better than the original, although there is some logic to play the original for its on-play skill. So taking a look at the archetype as a whole, we have a generally okay deck. It has a clear game plan and solid ways of reaching its objectives. The biggest issue at the moment is that the old support is centered more around reverse, which makes it difficult to use the V Hyakki Vogue. Additionally, this is another archetype that centers around a specific grade 3, and none of the support cards are Hyakkis, so all your plays are limited to grade 3. If this archetype were to get more support, it could definitely be decently viable, but like so many other archetypes, it's unlikely to ever get any kind of support. But for those of you who feel like trying, here's a deck code cooked up by my deck tester Orion. It focuses around trying to go for the 7 attack Asogi play on turn 4. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.